One of the biggest abiotic factors of ecosystems on planet Earth is the atmosphere. And the atmosphere is the layer of gases that surrounds the planet. A little about the atmosphere first. First of all, the atmosphere has many different layers, but the two most important layers are the troposphere, which is the atmosphere that affects living organisms. Then you have a small transitional zone, which is only found by the highest peaks of the mountains in terms of getting able to get to it by the ground. Then you have the stratosphere, and that's important because it contains the ozone layer. Well, the ozone layer was of great importance in the late 80s, early 1990s, because people noticed it was depleting. Well, the reason why the ozone layer is important is that it helps to absorb harmful ultraviolet radiation. We noticed things such as increase in melanoma and skin cancers. It was easier to go out and get a sunburn, and so we suspected that something was wrong, something was going on. Well, we found out that the ozone layer over time was thinning in many parts of the world, especially the polar areas. And the main culprit was a type of chemical called chlorofluorocarbons, which are produced from refrigerants in aerosol containers up until the late 1980s. Because of this effect, we've seen thinning of the ozone layer in many different parts of the world. And as a result, nations from around the world banned CFCs. And ever since, the good news has been that the banning of CFCs worldwide, the ozone should be fully restored by 2070. So here's an example of an environmental disaster that had been curbed by the same people that had brought it about. So if the ozone layer can be restored, then surely to goodness, we can tackle the next big problem, and that is of global warming. The biggest environmental threat humanity has ever faced is the current global warming trend that we are seeing. The global warming trend has and is currently and will cause rises in sea levels to low-lying areas, making billions become refugees. It has created drought in major agricultural areas, and has increased hurricanes, tropical storms, and tornadoes. All of these provide massive economic issues to help restore the infrastructure and residences and businesses of people who lose their homes due to these effects. Global warming was first identified in the 1950s, and an organization called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has published full reports since the 1990s, providing information on certain things that are going on with global warming. These are the facts done so far. From 1906 to 2006, average global temperatures have raised to 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit. It doesn't seem like a lot, but 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit is just the beginning. It is predicted to be up to 5-6 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the 21st century. The last 50 years have seen a more increase than the previous 50 years. In the last century, 11 out of the 12 hottest years on record took place between 1995 and 2012, and the decade of 2000 to 2009 was the warmest decade on record. Looking at this graph, you can see that the overall trend is a warming trend. Sure, we've had a few cool years here and there, but the overall trend is warming in essence, and especially towards the 1980s up until today. One of the unfortunate things is we would expect to see a 5 to 7 degree Fahrenheit temperature by the end of the 21st century if current trends continue. One of the unfortunate things about global warming is due to the lack of understanding of the process of climate science and global warming, a lot of myths have been perpetuated about the science of global warming. One of them, for example, was this idea that in the 60s and 70s, the idea of global cooling happened. Well, that was never supported by science. That was something that the media had perpetuated due to the number of cold winters that we had within those given decades. We've actually seen global warming trends going on since the early 1950s, and that is what's been supported by science ever since. What are the causes of global warming? Well, throughout the eons in Earth's history, global warming and global cooling have been totally natural processes. Things such as the Earth's orbit around the sun, getting closer to the sun, getting farther from the sun, the intensity of sunlight, the increased intensity brings warmth, and the decreased intensity brings cooling. also increased volcanism. All of these things have been normal causes of global warming and cooling. Well, up until the 1960s, one could argue that it was natural causes that was making global warming occur because we saw intensity of the sunlight increase there. But since the 60s, the sunlight's intensity and other natural forces have actually decreased, but we're still warming. Now, why is this? Some of the causes of global warming, especially the big one, it has to do with the increases in greenhouse gases, which I'll explain in a little bit. But burning of fossil fuels, as we mentioned in a previous video, releases CO2. And with that excess CO2 in the atmosphere, that helps to increase the warming effect of the atmosphere, trapping more heat from the sun. More and more livestock has been developed because there's more people to feed, and many different livestock are herbivores, which produce methane as a byproduct of breaking down plant material. Methane is also a greenhouse gas that's released into the atmosphere. And then also, too, the deforestation of many areas around the world, especially the tropical rainforest, basically prevents these plants from capturing the CO2 that's put into the atmosphere. So all of these together are the major causes of global warming. What does this have to do with the greenhouse effect? First of all, the greenhouse effect is a warming effect by the heat trapping capabilities of certain atmospheric gases. Things such as nitrous oxide, carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapor are all considered greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases are necessary. Without the greenhouse gases, the Earth would have anywhere from ranging to hundreds of degrees in temperature differences between day and night, which could not support life. So the greenhouse gases helps trap some of that heat during the day so that at nighttime the temperatures don't fall too drastically. If you don't understand this still, think of a car in the middle of summertime that you say you go into a store, you come back to your car with the windows rolled up. It is much hotter inside of the car. The glass acts like a greenhouse gas, traps the heat, preventing it from escaping the vehicle, therefore giving you the feeling that the car is much warmer than the outside. So it is in essence the increase in greenhouse gases that are the current reason as to why the climate change is occurring right now. So what are the consequences of global warming? Well, first of all, by 2100, sea levels are predicted to rise 7 inches to 1.9 feet. And here's a map showing the predictions. Blue, dark blue, represents land areas that will be flooded by the increase in water. Where does this come from? The melting of the ice caps and the glaciers found in inland areas of the mainland. Most people live within coastal habitats, so the rising of sea levels is going to displace current coastal cities and all the citizens that live there. It's going to create massive changes in the infrastructure, which will cause billions upon trillions of dollars. Intensive flooding. It's going to increase also the salinity of fresh water. So if you'll notice, here's the Mississippi River area, Amazon. These areas are now going to have salt water introduced, making more and more water undrinkable. It's going to be changes in precipitation. We should expect higher levels of rain and snow in the northern United States and Canada in the wintertime. It's going to decrease the precipitation in the southern United States in winter. And we should expect more droughts in the summer all over North America, especially out west. And just recently, in the summer of 2014, California has experienced the worst drought it has ever had. Global warming will also negatively affect agriculture, mostly because of the droughts in the summer. And with the effects in agriculture, will cause a crisis in the food with the booming population of people. And lastly, many species of organisms will not be able to adapt to these changes, especially those in the polar regions, as they have nowhere else to go. So how do we combat global warming? Unfortunately, the solution is not as easy as banning chlorofluorocarbons as it was with ozone. First and foremost, cut greenhouse gas emissions. Unfortunately, greenhouse gas emissions are developed by very easy to access, such as coal and oil and petroleum, and it's also very cheap. Not only that, it's dependable. Many of the alternative fuels that are being used today are still in the works. It is successful in certain parts of the world. So more alternative fuel research would have to be done in order to help combat global warming while lowering the greenhouse gas emissions. Develop ways to capture CO2 in the atmosphere, such as algae farms. Slow habitat destruction. So the problem with all of these methods is they require economic trade-offs. But the cost of displaced refugees, damaged agriculture, and rerouting infrastructure is going to cost a whole lot more. If you want more information on global warming and climate change, check out skepticalscience.com. I like this website because it also combats many of the myths perpetuated by those who deny climate science. I know it seems like all gloom and doom, but there are many solutions in the works, and hopefully our generation will be able to combat the negative effects of global warming. Next, we're going to look at what Earth's climate normally would look like and why different regions of the world experience the rainfall and temperature patterns that they do.